attention. There was no vehicle. Nothing by the old crooked shed at the edge of the woods. Nothing by the alcove where the frosted lawn met the gravel. She looked down the long, winding driveway. Nothing. This was more than a little strange, especially considering the cold and the fact that they were in the middle of nowhere. A bizarre image flashed through her mind. The family, hand in hand, wandering out of the darkening trees. "Where's your car?" Eve asked. "Hmm? Your car," she repeated. "I don't see it."
"Oh," the father said, "down on the road."
Eve blinked at him, unsure.
"We tried pulling up," he explained. "Too steep, too much ice, so we walked instead."
"Ah, that's quite the trek. Almost 5 minutes on foot." As the father responded, something else caught Eve's eye. A smudge of dirt on his plaid coat. Her focus, especially in moments of stress, was often distracted by irrelevant details. She called it her broken spidey sense. A random speck halfway across a room would suddenly draw her attention. A drip, drip, dripping faucet would turn louder than somebody speaking right next to her. It was hard for Eve to fully explain. The closest she could get was, imagine if several times a day, all at once, every single thing around you became impossible to ignore. Needless to say, she wasn't good at parties.
"Is that okay?"
The father's voice drifted into her thoughts. She tilted her head. He'd asked a question she hadn't heard.
"It's perfectly understandable," he clarified. "If you'd prefer we not look around. There's no pressure."
Eve let out a strained, one-syllable laugh. Sorry, I'm not sure," she stammered. "My partner and we're still in the middle of moving in, and I just need to call and check."
"Not a problem,"
he said. Of course, a well-adjusted individual would have simply told him no. But self-destructive people-pleasing was another of Eve's plentiful idiosyncrasies. She had a crippling fear of disappointing anyone, even complete strangers, even people she disliked. Over the years, she'd found a cheap trick to get around this, internally called the "Let Me Check with Charlie" card. It had become something of a conflict-avoidant mantra. Eve would never have to say no to anyone if her girlfriend did it for her. At first, Charlie had had no problem shutting people down. In fact, she rather quite enjoyed it. Though, after a while, she started to encourage Eve to stand up for herself a little more. "Voluntary exposure is the best way to overcome fear," Charlie often said. Eve understood this and was trying, but I'll be right back. Eve had started to push the door shut when the father said,
"Sorry, but is it all right if we wait in the foyer? It's pretty cold out here."
Eve opened her mouth, hesitated again.
"We promise not to burn the place down," he joked.
She tried to smile. "Yeah, all good."
"Thank you, seriously. We'll stay right by the door."
He motioned his family inside, telling the boys not to touch anything. Eve watched as, one by one, these strangers filed into her home. The distant alarm bells of her subconscious rang out. She vaguely remembered hearing stories of strangers showing up at houses, claiming they had lived there once, asking to take a quick look around. Then, when the unsuspecting victims had let down their guard, robbery, torture, murder. Though she'd never heard of people doing this while posing as a whole family, kids and all, but there's a first time for everything, right? Something lurking in the deepest, darkest chamber of her mind weighed in.